if you don't mind,
Sure.
Tony.
Yeah.
For you, you're a lieutenant colonel, okay? One of my biggest heroes when I was in the military was a man named Lieutenant Colonel P. Cox. He ended up being a general later on, but he was one of my favorite guys I ever worked under when I was at the 101st Airborne. Lieutenant Colonel is a very high-ranking place to be, and you've seen a lot, you've talked a lot, you have a lot of things that happen. That day, then Senator Biden, today ex-President Joe Biden, says 5 of them were not allowed to come
That's
on
correct.
today.
Yeah.
You were one of the 5.
I was.
What were you told that first you were invited? Who invited you? And then what did they say that you can't come on?
Well, let me give a little bit of background for
Please.
context. So, being a lieutenant colonel is a bit of a misnomer. That was a part of my cover that happened during the time I was outed by DIA. I'm in something called the Military Intelligence Accepted Career Program, MICEP. We go back and forth between being civilians. I'm also a retired GS-14. You can look it up. This is unclassified, but I'm just saying. So what happened was, Pat, is that when I came back from Afghanistan, after I disclosed my role in the Able Danger operation, I was immediately suspended by Defense Intelligence over nonsense.
Who suspended you?
The Defense Intelligence Agency. This was in the beginning of 2004.
Who was the shot caller that did that? Who called the shot?
Yeah, it was Major General, I'll think of his name in a second, and he was a Marine Corps general. I'll think of it in a second.
Two-star general.
Two-star general.
Okay.
He was the DO, the Director of Operations, and at the time the director was Admiral Jacoby. And when I got suspended, I had some time on my hands because nobody knew what was going on. There was 3 nonsensical allegations, which, by the way, the Army resolved in my favor, and I got promoted to lieutenant colonel. You don't get promoted if you have standing at potential adverse actions over you. So the Army saw them. It's like, congratulations, you're being promoted. Defense Intelligence used the 3 same allegations to suspend my clearance and get me fired, just saying how wacky that is. And think about that from the business perspective. You're looking at facts, and Army says, yeah, this is not nonsense. Defense Intelligence, who I have the issue with, suspend me and fire me over the same allegations. Think about that. We can go through them in greater detail at some point.
But, Tony, you have to tell the story as to
I'm
what
getting
you
to
had done in Afghanistan when Mueller came through.
Well, I'm saying so.
You have to explain that.
So, Zelikow had met with me in Afghanistan.
Philip Zelikow?
Philip Zelikow.
And who is he?
He is the staff director of the 9/11 Commission. Kurt mentioned him earlier.
Okay.
So, and when I was undercover, again, this is a bit complicated. When I was undercover in alias in Afghanistan, being the director of operations for the clandestine operations in Afghanistan in 2003, it's when Zelikow came through, Bagram, and he was part of the 9/11 Commission. He and several staffers came through, and their task, this is the 9/11 Commission task, was to do research on events before, the day of, and after the 9/11 attacks. They basically wanted to talk to people with firsthand anecdotal information. So I raised my hand. It's like, hey, they've probably already heard of this, but I want to talk about Able Danger. And this was October of 2003. And so what I'm going to tell you now is what I told them. Able Danger was an entrepreneurial concept that was created for the purposes of targeting a non-geographic target, Al-Qaeda. You had Erik Prince on a year ago. Erik's concepts, and I love Erik. I consider us friends. I hope so. He believes in entrepreneurial concepts. We did that internally. We were trying to figure out the best and brightest way to go after Al-Qaeda in 1999.
This is a PMC model?
It actually is a PMC model.
It is a private military contract.
I've talked to him about it.
Yeah. Got it.
So what we did is that as a reservist, I know you're going to laugh at this, as a major, I was down in Tampa, and the DIA rep, Al Downs, said, go talk. This is a major reservist going to brief the commanding general, Pete Schoonmaker, on my civilian mission.
Pete Schoonmaker.
General Pete Schoonmaker, who was commander of Special Operations Command in 1999 to 2000. There he is. So imagine, if you will, when people have a hard time wrapping their mind around this, a little old reservist major goes in to brief the commanding general of SOCOM on what I do in my civilian DIA job. Out of that meeting, Pat, General Schoonmaker says, I get him read in to able danger. And I had no idea what that was. So the next day, I think this was August of 1999, I'm brought down into a secure, you guys have your thing in a bank vault. Well, SCIFs are like bank vaults. They're secure facilities within secure facilities. I go down and I'm introduced to Captain Scott Philpott, who's in a lieutenant commander, and I'm given this big old binder. The binder's about 5 inches thick. He says, there you go. And I start reading it. Scott Philpott.
Okay.
And I start reading it, and it is like the e-ticket to Disneyland. We're going downtown to go after Al-Qaeda. This is a concept to go and conduct offensive operations against the growing threat. Remember you talked about the value judgment of what you invest in? We had already been hit twice in Africa from Al-Qaeda. And there was a recognition that was a growing threat. So secretly, General Hugh Shelton, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, you can bring him up. Hugh Shelton was chairman of the Joint Chiefs in '99, had tasked Pete Schoonmaker with able danger. Able danger was a campaign plan. You're a business guy, so you guys do campaigns, right? Figure out resources, you figure out objectives, you sign them, you sign resources to tasks to potential outcomes. That's what able danger was. It was all an entrepreneurial concept.
Interesting.
Yes. So Pete.
When did able danger start? 99.
99.
Late 99.
It was.
So it has nothing to do with 9/11.
No. It gets there. Let me get you there. So able danger was the offensive concept off the books. Remember, you see in the movies all the time the euphemism of off the books. We were an off the books operation.
But if I'm not mistaken, it was under Erik Kleinsmith's.
No. I'll get to Erik. Erik had no idea. As a matter of fact, he's never been read in everything we did. So I'm read into the project, and my job is to develop access for purposes of weaponized technology. This again, think offensively. This is before 9/11, and we're tasked to go kill Al-Qaeda before 9/11. Think about now. This is the problem with the whole thing we're talking about.
Preventative measures.
Bingo. Yes. This is why they want to distract with the chart constantly, Pat. This is why they were upset with me testifying. You remember the Israeli op, the pager op, Pat?
Mm-hmm, of course.
They weren't the first ones to think about that. Just saying. I have to be careful about where I'm going because I'm still trying to get permission from the Pentagon to talk about my role. My role in able danger to this day has never been disclosed. I've been said to be the coordinator. I've been a reservist. My role was so highly classified, he probably remembers this, I was waived in closed hearings with Kurt. I was waived off by the staff director of the House Armed Service Committee because I couldn't talk about my role. He was literally in the back of the room saying, don't say that. You can't say that. So to this day, we have never talked about, and I'm still trying to get permission to talk about it. Anyway, suffice it to say that what I was doing in my civilian job was what we wanted to introduce to the able danger operation as one of the offensive options. And this is the key. This wasn't about waiting till something happened. This was about us, Pete Schoonmaker, putting together a team, the best and the brightest, to put together options for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Hugh Shelton, to go do something before 9/11. That was the whole project. That was the concept. The idea was, Pat, we knew they were coming. We put together a team that would be invested in doing things that have never been done before. And oh, by the way, how do you target something that's never been targeted? How do you do something relating to a non-geographic target, a transnational target? Data mining. At the time, nobody knew about it. Remember, this is 99. This is before anybody understood the power of the internet. So when I'm tasked to help them figure out how do we go about targeting all of the ranch. Pete Schoonmaker called it the ranch, the Special Operations Command ranch. That includes the Secret Army of Northern Virginia, Delta, Rangers. It's the options that were available for us to do something. And oh, by the way, the other thing key about this was able danger was the first time Special Operations Command was ever the supported sync. This is important because that means they were the lead. They were the ones asking the other regional syncs to help them. It was huge. This was groundbreaking.
I just pulled up and I asked, what was the original purpose of Able Danger? Mission objective, number one, map Al-Qaeda's global network. The team used open source intelligence, public records, website news, and advanced data analysis tools to construct link charts of suspected terrorists and their connections. Number two, identify terrorist cells in the U.S. Able Danger reportedly flagged individuals later tied to 9/11, including Mohammed Atta, based on behavior patterns, travel records, and communication metadata.
Correct.
Number three, provide operational intelligence to military planners. The goal was to preemptively disrupt terror plots through actionable intelligence passed to agencies like the FBI and the CIA.
That's it. So I got this task, and it's like, what do? I knew Liwa was experimenting with data mining, and I'll let Erik take over here because we had no way to map Al-Qaeda. So this is a long way to answering your question, I know, Pat, but you need to understand the picture of what got us into the room.
I guess what I want to know is who told you can't be in the hearing? Who called and said you're out?
The Senate.
DOD leadership, Army leadership said you can't go in.
The Senate's the one that.
How far before the hearing did they say that? An hour before, a day before?
That morning.
That morning.
I was in. You can pull up pictures of the hearing. I'm in uniform, standing right next to the charts. There, right. If you Google Able Danger Senate hearing 2005, it should come up with a number of Time Life pictures that show all of us together. Where I'm in the back row next to J.D. Smith, who's going to become, here we go. Right there. See? I'm right there.
I see you.
And there's Russ Queso, there's Kurt, there's J.D. Smith, and I think you're there somewhere, right?
I'm hidden behind one of the maps.
So we were going to lay out, everything I'm laying out to you right now, we were going to lay out in great detail. And so this is where, to answer your question, what I was going to do is build the case of why, and by the way, Pat, one key thing to remember, we weren't supposed to find what we found. We were off the books. We were looking at Al-Qaeda from a fresh perspective. None of us were experts on this issue. I would argue that we became a dangling participle, an inconvenient organization that saw what the deep state was doing, and that's why they came after us.
Did any one of you at the time have a relationship with the president, President Trump, currently president?
No.
Did you have a relationship?
No, not till later.
Before you show anything, the only reason I'm sharing this is, Rob, do you have a clip of President Trump on Morning Joe Scarborough? I don't know if you guys have seen this or not. Morning Joe is doing a show, and they're talking about a book that he wrote that came 19 months before 9/11. And just listen to Morning Joe's reaction to this. Go for it.
BuzzFeed dug up an old quote from Donald Trump talking about a large-scale terror attack 19 months before 9/11. In his 2000 book, The America We Deserve, Trump wrote, "I really am convinced we're in danger of the sort of terrorist attacks that will make the bombing of the 1993 Trade Center look like little kids playing with firecrackers." Trump also mentioned the mastermind of the attack, writing, quote, "One day, we're told that a shadowy figure with no fixed address named Osama bin Laden is public enemy number one, and U.S. jet fighters lay waste to his camp in Afghanistan. He escapes back under some rock, and a few news cycles later, it's on to a new enemy and a new crisis." Trump.
Wait. Mm-hmm. Okay, hold on a second. Mm-hmm. Is this really Trump before 9/11? Have you read this?
It's 2000 in his book.
Are we making this? Did you make this up, Mika?
Nick.
I did.
Did you make this up?
Yeah,
Nick,
exactly.
tell us it's over, right? Because
Will you
you're wrong
stop?
about everything.
Mika, stop. God.
I don't think it's over.
What's that? What's the rage?
So this
Will
is
you
real,
stop
Rob.
No, it's
on him?
cute. I think it's
So
cute.
what do you think about the
really
fact
quickly,
that,
though.
Robbie Composite, what do you think about the fact that the president said this 19 months before 9/11 happened?
I think wise people understood what was forming because we were told by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs to go look at this. And one of the notable things about this, now full disclosure, I know President Trump. I was the national security advisor of the Trump 2020 campaign. So I do have, and I did meet him way later in 2015. But I think he had a sense, like many of us, that something was brewing. And to continue your point, to answer your question, when I was the coordinator of trying to pull the team together behind the scenes, I took the Able Danger team to land information warfare activity at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. And that's where Erik comes into it. They were doing an extraordinary job of, again, look at the time frame, 98, 99, 2000. Pat, nobody knew the power of big data. And so we were the first operational unit to actually use a combination of open source, closed source. Part of my job was to actually combine the top secret piece. One of my deputies, Teresa McSwain, Lieutenant Colonel McSwain, brought the NSA database down to Garland, Texas, to combine them together to do this overall targeting, to combine, basically combine things. This was a major effort. And again, before I let Erik, before I turn it over to Erik, remember, we're talking about a massive investment of resources, as you, as a businessman, would recognize as a priority. Yet somehow they reduced it down to a map of a chart they couldn't find to dismiss everything we did, because they were so desperate to focus on one thing and push us away.
Okay, so now, Erik, where you come in here as an Army major, intelligence officer, you're the one that was you testified before Congress and were ordered to destroy 2.5 terabytes of data.
Right.
So you know exactly what's in that data.
It was, well, yes and no, because before the destruction, we were giving a cease and desist order down through DOD to stop what you're doing because you're violating intelligence oversight rules on how you collected that information.
Which is not true.
Well,
there was no violation.
Right. One of the problems that, that was me,
you?
a much younger me. So,
nice time.
but what we learned, again, we were running several different operations. This was a very young organization. It was only I think 2 years old by the time this started up. I was the first military chief of the intelligence branch. So it was an operational unit designed to help the Army or support the Army in fighting information warfare, information operations, psychological, deception, operational security, that kind of thing. So we had operational teams, but I had a 24-person intel branch within that group. And we were getting, because of the power that we were given with these new data mining tools, and I'm telling you, they were bleeding edge. We were doing a lot of things that we were making mistakes along the way. I got called in one morning because apparently I had conducted a denial of service attack against DIA, and then now NGA, their proxy server, shut the whole thing down, only because we were training a harvesting tool to pick up different information, and it hit DIA on a classified network and started harvesting the entire agency. And so, denial of service, they shut the whole thing down. So I got blamed, I got called out on the carpet for that one morning. That's what I mean, that like the types of technology we were trying to wrestle with and figure out. Once we had gotten those down, and it was a great combination of the data that we were bringing in, the tools that we were using, but also more importantly, the people and the processes that we had put in place and the folks that I had assigned to different tasks. We had first done an operation using data mining to show Department of Defense how our technology was being stolen, specifically by China and some other countries, and we were able to map it out by using a single technology as a sample. That became a firestorm because it had gotten leaked that we were doing this work. We received a subpoena from Congressman Dan Burton that he wanted all that information. So we spent a weekend making 30,000 copies to deliver it by a data set on paper to do that. But that got us on the map, and that's why Tony came to see us.
Is this anywhere? Is this 2.5 terabytes anywhere right now? Does anybody have access to this right now?
No. And here's
100% no one has it?
No.
I think it may exist.
Here's the rub, because it was myself and one of my warrant officer analysts who was on the team. We had to have a deep discussion because we were told, if you're collecting information that has information about U.S. persons from an intelligence standpoint, I mean, they beat this regulation into your head every year as a requirement. So we were warned, oh, by the way, all this stuff that you had collected, and it wasn't just one chart, it was dozens of charts. We had dozens of connections. We had cells in Northern Africa, we had cells in the Middle East, we had cells in the Far East, and then we started seeing cells pop up within the U.S. My hometown of Plymouth, Michigan popped up as a potential operation, a front organization that was using my little hometown outside of Detroit to funnel money into the organization. So it was more than
Which
just
organization?
operatives.
Al-Qaeda?
So it wasn't just operatives, it was an entire support and sympathetic
But is there
footprints.
enough information here where you know who was behind 9/11?
Well, can I add something real quick?
Yeah.
We had a person that was actually monitoring global movement of individuals of interest via mosques, all the mosques.
Okay.
Alejandra Mogoliner.
She did a 3-hour interview for my oral history, which has never been released. I'm the only one that has the interview.
And the DOD and IG interviewed her and then basically proceeded to not ask her a single question about what we're about to talk about. Erik was provided via Orion Scientific as the source, detailed data about individuals moving between mosques. So it wasn't simply big data. It was the fact that we were targeting down to the mosque level, which makes it hugely controversial. You and I can agree that
But Pat,
the
there's
whole
a bigger
issue,
story here. The bigger story in the Congress is that I was funding their program as the chairman of the R&D subcommittee. I would go down to Fort Belvoir because all the services were standing up information dominance centers. The Air Force, the Navy, and the Army. The Army's at Fort Belvoir. I was impressed with what they were doing. They were using software like Starlight and Spires and others that no one else was using. John Hamre was the Deputy Secretary of Defense. I suggested, John, you go down and see what your people are doing. He went down. They'll tell you he went down because of me. He looked at it and he said, called me and said, Mr. Chairman, you're absolutely right. We need this capability. Far beyond what the Army's using it for, we need this capability. I proposed establishing a data fusion center that would not just be for the Army or DOD, would be for the entire government. So John Hamre suggested to me, Congressman, I will support and manage it either at the White House or at the Pentagon. But you've got to convince the FBI and the CIA to allow us to use their raw data because of the big behemoths. There are 33 classified systems. So on November the 4th of 1999, a date I'll never forget, I had John Hamre in my office. I had the Deputy Director of the FBI, the Deputy Director of the CIA, and I handed them a proposal to create the NOAA, National Operations and Analysis Hub, policymaker and warfighters tool to deal with emerging transnational terrorist threats. I didn't write that. Friends in Intel wrote it for me. John Hamre said, it's a great idea, we need it, I'll manage it. I said, I'll get it funded. The FBI said, it's great, we'll support it. And the CIA said, we don't want it. We're doing something called CI-21. The big question for 9/11 is, why did the CIA not want to be a part of a fusion center that the Deputy Secretary of Defense wanted? I was going to fund, FBI was supporting, 2 years before 9/11. The biggest criticism after 9/11 was the lack of fusion of intelligence data. That's what they were doing. And that recommendation was 2 years prior. And that recommendation was based on what these folks were doing. Erik, Tony, Eileen Pricer, Scott Philpott, and all the others, J.D. Smith, that were a part of the Able Danger team. That's the big story.
And he didn't know about us.
I didn't know the details until 9/11. They brought the charts in, and I took them right to the White House.
You don't know about Able Danger?
I didn't know that. I didn't get ready to the program. I didn't need to. Hi, I'm Kurt Weldon, teacher, firefighter, father of 5, family man, who spent 20 years in the Congress after serving as mayor and county chairman of my county in suburban Philadelphia. My intent is to give experiences and information and knowledge about the 104 countries that I led delegations to during my 20 years in the Congress, and all of the work that I did on behalf of America's firefighters and first responders traveling around the country. If you'd like to connect with me, connect on Minect, and I will get back to you.
Hi, I'm retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaffer. I'm a senior intelligence officer / retired spy with a great deal of information regarding my 30-plus years of operational experience, plus 9/11 issues relating to Able Danger. I wrote a book, Operation Dark Heart, New York Times bestseller. I'm the National Security Advisor for the Trump 2020 campaign. I'm an elected official in North Carolina as a county commissioner. So reach out to me via Minect. If you have questions, I'm happy to try to give you answers that will help you. Look forward to talking to you.
If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.